We are live, boys.
Hey, listen, the fourth box isn't for everybody. It's only for those people that want to have fun, have a bourbon, smoke a cigar, and come up with absolutely ingenious business and brainstorming ideas.
I could do this all night long, guys.
I love to be a disruptor.
The first guy that gets that done is the winner.
You can't get any better than this. But don't worry, whatever happens in the fourth box stays in the box, baby.
This is some good shit. These notes are big.
All right, everybody, welcome to this week's DWIN. Remember, this will be coming to you live now every first and third Thursday of the month at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Today, we've got a very special guest with us. But before we get there, let me introduce the solutionist himself in the house. It looks like he's driving, Sandy Cerami. Lost him there. He's coming right back on. Jamil Zabaneh will be joining us. And of course, we've got a special guest today, Gary House. He is the president of Gary House and Associates. He is a former director for NCM. And today he is going to be talking with us about dealership sales and then sales management compensation planning. So I know that's a hot topic going on right now. So Gary's he's graciously agreed to share his knowledge and his experience with us on this and his expertise. So welcome, Gary.
Thank you very, very much, Scott. Sandy has recently nicknamed me as an oracle, and I think that means ancient. And I guess in the retail automobile business, I am. I've been in the car business since 1961. When I began my career as a engineering student at General Motors Institute in Flint, Michigan. I married into the retail business in 1964, and my father-in-law decided that in 1968 he was going to semi-retire, so I became general manager of the dealership, and unfortunately he passed away in 1975, and I had learned about that time about just enough so I could find my ass with both hands in the car business. I ran that dealership very, very successfully until 1987, and I decided I was done with Flint, Michigan, and done with General Motors, and decided to get out of the retail business, and begin a consulting career. So I formed Gary House and Associates in the spring of 1987, and began doing training and consulting. And I did that until 1995, when I was fortunate enough to get an offer I couldn't refuse from NCM Associates, and they asked me to merge my consulting practice with them because they were not at that time in the consulting business. They were in the 20 group business only, and decided they wanted to get into consulting, and I was the guy that was going to help them get started. So I did that from 1995 until the year 2010. Most notably during that period, I was able to work with one of the public companies, Sonic Automotive, who asked me in the year 2000 to develop and conduct a dealer academy program for them. And I did that from 2000 to 2008. And in 2010, NCM elected me, I guess, to develop and launch their educational arm, NCM Institute. And I was the director of the NCM Institute until I retired in 2014, at which point I relaunched Gary House and Associates. So in the last 6 years, I have been doing some dealer academies. In fact, I will be completing my 20th dealer academy in November for a private company, a group of 20-some dealers.
Nice.
I do a lot of financial analysis and executive coaching, remote control on the phone, on Zoom and GoToMeeting. I do some acquisition analysis, and I do compensation planning. And among all the other things that I do, I am a continual student of the retail automobile business. So I am consistently adding resources to my library and watching seminars and attending things like DWIN.
Yeah. We appreciate it too.
Well, thank you.
And
I love the fact, you know what I love? The fact that the oracle of automotive with decades of experience is still that student that's interested in staying in terms of, keeping his focus on what's current and what's relevant. That is a lesson for anybody that's on this episode of DWIN right now. I love it, Gary. That's inspirational, man.
Thank you very much.
And Sandy, it's good to have you back. And also we skipped over Will on the intro. Will Fernandez is in the house with us. At the end, we will update everybody to some slight changes with PPP. He can fill us in towards the end of the hour here. So, Gary, real quick. So comp plans, especially on the sales management side, pretty hot topic right now. Why do you think it's why should a dealer consider changing comp plans?
Well, typically there's three reasons. And I'm going to leave the one that's most current alone until the last. First, the comp plans are out of line with gross profit structure. Basically, that means that the dealer principal, the general managers, realize that he's paying too much to his people. That's number one. Number two, the general managers or the dealers realize that they cannot attract the level of talent that they want to attract based on their current compensation plan. So that means they're not paying enough or not paying it the right way. The change that we're seeing the change that we're seeing is driving it the most right now is the fact that the strategies that dealers are trying to implement are not aligned with the traditional compensation plans that general manager or the sales managers have had. So that's typically the reason. So they want to get them aligned based on the current strategies they're trying to implement in the stores. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So let me ask, what are some of these things that have been changing where dealers are struggling trying to find that right balance, right? Because no one wants to pay to the point where you regret. We all want to pay over and above. We want to be considered having a very generous pay plan. At the same time, we can't, like you said, if we pay too low, we don't attract the right talent. So with all the changes that's happened recently, what are some of the challenges dealers are facing? And in your opinion, what's the right path to kind of align these things? What would you advise?
Well, I think one of the things that I have tried to do with most of my clients is I think it's most important that they remove any silos that exist in the variable operation side of the business. Silos between new cars, used cars, finance and insurance. And to do that, one of the easiest ways that they can do that is by having all of their managers on the same pay line. It does not mean they pay them the same way or have the same metrics for paying them, but they're all on the same pay line. And the pay line that I like to see happens to be what I call super gross, which is our traditionally defined sales to sales front gross and our F&I gross and anything that is normally reported in net additions and deductions, such as manufacturer incentives, dock fees, and PACs. So I like to add all those things together and have everybody paid on those things, and their percentage of payout would be based on other things, other activities that they might be responsible or accountable for in various things, different things in different departments.
Well, and you're seeing a lot of high volume stores that are moving towards what you called super gross, worried not necessarily forgetting the front end gross, but not making it the be all end all to will I take this deal anymore, because they know their averages and all the other profit centers. And so it's about turning the units and it's about volume. I just did a podcast interview with Michael Poro over at Honda World here in Louisville, Kentucky. And he's a big proponent of super gross or a variation of it. James Baining is another example. He's with Asbury. All of these guys are, I'm not as worried about my front end because I know I'm going to make money for my store here, here, here. And as I add more clients in and build that market share, they become service customers down the line and so on. So do you have any type of specific thing that you're seeing is working well with that type of mindset?
Hey, Scott, just a real quick point here. And Gary, I think you may agree. The reason why I love what Gary is saying is because I see a lot of times where we have conflict in the compensation plans between a GSM, a sales manager, a used car manager, an F&I manager. And when Gary talks about getting everybody on the same pay line, I want to be really specific. It's about getting everybody homogenized and in unison in terms of what the priorities are and what is most important in terms of the overall operation of the front end of the dealership. The other piece is that if we do it the right way, we avoid what I call compensation stacking, where we have everybody taking a percentage of the gross profit. And then before we know it, we've completely exploded our compensation as a percent of gross profit. And so, Gary, if you could speak to that specifically, I think it would help a lot of people on the call.
Well, exactly. In terms of sales management, typically what I look at, and it's going to vary slightly between domestic stores and high volume import stores and highline import stores, but I look at a percentage of super gross from a budget standpoint that I'm prepared to pay. Domestic stores, for instance, I look at 10%, and if I'm going to pay 10%, then I want to make sure that of that 10%, this manager gets this manager gets this manager gets
Right.
this. Or if I'm including F&I in that, then I may be prepared to pay 15%. And so that whole 15% would be spread out among everybody in the management team, including F&I. One of the other issues we have, and this is one of the harder ones to address, is the fact that in most markets, F&I producers and F&I directors are still making way more money than desk managers are, and in some cases they're making more than the GSM, and I don't think that's right. So we're trying to fix that, but it's tough to do.
So, Gary, we have a question from Michael Ropo. He wants you to define, and I think you did this, but can you define a little bit better for him what your definition of super gross is?
I will show that in the as I move further in this presentation, if I might.
All right.
But basically, in general, it's anything that is below reported in other income that goes up or down as we sell more or less cars. So it includes anything that is paid to us from the manufacturer that's based on number of cars we sell, anything such as dock fees, which is based on the number of cars we sell, plus any hard packs on new or used vehicles. So anything that is related, that is really truly gross. If we sell one more car and that goes up, that's what I call, that's part of the super gross. So
Right.
it also, obviously, it also includes all the gross that we normally look at traditionally as gross profit in new, used, and F&I, and so it's a combination of all those things.
And the other piece that I love about what you're saying, Gary, is you're using key performance indicators like, let's say, inventory turns, days in stock, average number of days in stock, et cetera, things that will help create hyper efficiency and hyper profitability as triggers for additional income opportunities, as opposed to, setting up targets that we will make a decision to either roll a car or not roll a car based on a particular, per vehicle retail that we've got to hit where, oh my God, it's going to drop me down to a different category. I don't want to roll that car. I'll sandbag it till next month, or I won't even take the deal at all. I love the way you approach this from a KPI perspective as well.
Well, it's hard to get in many cases, it's hard to get the managers aligned with the fact that it's so important to sell the car, sell the car, sell the car. Because when we sell the car, we pick up all the additional super gross, plus we pick up a customer, plus we pick up all the internal gross that goes into the deal as well. Okay, so it's
absolutely
a lot of money involved.
No question.
Okay.
You want to jump into the presentation?
Yeah, let me keep going a little bit here, and then I'll move into the presentation. When I started in the car business, started in the consulting business, I had to make a decision whether or not I wanted to be a generalist or whether I wanted to become a specialist. And I always thought that I was pretty good at a lot of things, but I didn't think I was great at anything. And to be a specialist, I think you got to be great. So I didn't start out to be a specialist in compensation planning. That happened accidentally. And it happened during the first 3 or 4 years that I was in the consulting business, and I was getting a lot of requests for compensation plans. And I don't know how it happened or what was going on with it, but all of a sudden this seemed to be a niche. And then I found out the hard way what was going on with it was the fact that nobody else wanted to do it. So I happened to be the only one out there that was doing compensation plans in the consulting field. And I was wondering why that was. And then I also learned the hard way that you don't make any friends when you're doing consulting in compensation planning, because compensation planning relates to change. And people in the retail automobile business don't like change. And they specifically don't like change if it involves their pay plan. And if you're the general manager or the GSM, they don't like it much because they don't make a lot of friends when they start implementing a pay plan change. So, it's not a win-win situation. So, again, I was one of the few, and it got to the point where when I did a lot of work with dealer groups, particularly when I was working with NCM, and word got out, I'd walk into a store and somebody'd say, "Uh-oh, here comes that compensation guy. We're in trouble now." So, that's the way things sort of worked out.
I share your pain, Gary. I share your pain.
Anyway, so that's how it got started. There's some things about compensation that I want to just preface the presentation with. The first one is I do have a compensation philosophy. It is detailed in writing. I've sent you guys a copy of it. It's on my website under the Connect with Gary tab, if anybody wants to look at it. We talked about why change compensation plans. I don't need to go there again.
So
next point is
hey, Gary.
Yeah.
Gary, before we move on, Eric Ruby's got a very good question. He said, you mentioned 10% comp on the super gross for domestics. In your opinion, what's a good number for luxury imports?
For luxury imports, I think it ought to be somewhere down in the 7% range. But again, I can't tell you exactly what that number is. The guidelines are also on my website. And when we open up this PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to briefly use, my website is there if anybody wants to look at it. But compensation guidelines are under the resources tab. So they're compensation guidelines for domestics, for also for luxury imports and for volume imports.
Okay.
Okay, so there is no such thing as one compensation plan fits all. Okay. Every dealership is different. The culture is different. The people are different. There's tremendous differences. And when you start looking for cookie cutter plans that will work for every store, you're making a mistake. I just want to point that out going in. It does not work. And that's one of the reasons why I have always had a hard and fast rule that I do not, unless somebody's listened to a presentation like this from me, I do not provide any sample compensation plans because, as far as I'm concerned, that's like putting a gun in the hand of a child. So, although if anybody after seeing this presentation, if anybody is interested in having sample plans, and I've got one in my library, I don't have any problem sharing it. Okay. Okay. So that's that point. Why plans don't work? There's several reasons why they don't work. One of which I'm going to address in the presentation, but the other one, and this probably is obvious, but it doesn't seem to be to a lot of folks, and that is that for sales compensation, advisor compensation, if you've got too many salespeople, your compensation plan is not going to work. If you got too few, it's not going to work. So the compensation plan has to be tailored to the productivity levels and the staffing levels in your store that you want to see. And once that's done, then it's a matter of ensuring that you maintain the same headcount that the compensation plan is designed to. Okay, so, and finally, it's my belief today, and you sort of touched on this, Sandy, but I think that where possible, we need to be incentivizing our salespeople and our managers to some extent on the desired behavior that we want to see rather than the results. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we move along. But processes, activities are so important, and our managers need to be accountable to ensure that our people habitually perform and flawlessly execute the processes that we have laid out in our dealerships. And if we have the compensation plan supporting those activities, that makes it so much more easier for them to do that. So the pay plan I'm going to show you happens to come from a client that, I believe is a out of the box dealer client. I've been familiar with this.
That's what we want, Gary.
Yep. I've been familiar with this family dealership since the mid 70s, and it's now in the third generation. The dealer principal is now the second generation, and his son is the GSM. So they are historically they've been out of the box since Grandpa, and Grandpa's my age. So it's a store that has, it's a General Motors store that has 16 salespeople. 10 of the salespeople are what we are calling the primary sales staff. They are what you might look at and say, okay, this is the traditional salesperson that we see in most stores today. And the other 6 salespeople are the veterans. These are the aces. These are the experts. And we got 2 different pay plans. And the senior sales staff, the 6 of them handle their own F&I. And the 6 of them pretty much work their own portfolio. They don't take many floor ups. They rarely take ups that come in from the BDC or inbound telephone calls, blind telephone calls. They handle their own business, and they make a lot of money, and they do a great job. So we had to blend these 2 plans together to have it make sense for the store. And I think when you see it, you'll be impressed that it did come out that way. So I wanted to just share that. That's why that store is unique. So whenever you're ready,
we're ready.
Let's do it. Let's go to the PowerPoint.
You've got it.
Okay. Now, can I advance through this?
You're on it. You're controlling it, big man.
Perfect. Okay. So slide 1. As a subject matter expert, I believe there are several key steps, and there are 7 steps to successfully developing and implementing pay plans for vehicle sales and management personnel. I use these steps consistently with all sales and management compensation plans. When I begin a compensation plan to start with, what I want to do is develop what I call, a target level of target compensation. I think I jumped a slide. No, I didn't. Okay. So I start with 4 levels at the top. This is step 1. And I begin each plan by establishing 4 performance levels, an A, B, C, and D job, and I rank these as superior, expected, average, and unacceptable. Then I begin the planning itself by establishing target monthly compensation amounts and target metrics for each performance level. You'll notice that I use 2 metrics here. I use per retail unit delivered, and I also use percent of variable gross. And when I say variable gross in this example, it means super gross. Okay. Next, it's a matter of budgeting the compensation amount. And this means setting these target metrics that I just mentioned is really the same thing as budgeting. We have to figure out how the new plan will compare to best practice guidelines as a percent of gross, and how will it compare to sales compensation being offered by our competitors for the sales talent that is out there. This is an example of the compensation guidelines that I mentioned. This is the guidelines for domestics. And you will note up here, salesperson compensation 17% with note 1. Note 1 down here says calculated as a percent of adjusted gross, which I mean super gross, which includes the following if reported below the line in other income: vehicle hardpacks, dock fees, and manufacturer incentives. So we've got all of the front gross, including used car gross, used car wholesale gross, any dealer trade expense, anything that relates to gross as it's normally reported, all F&I gross less chargebacks. And so all those things are taken into consideration. And these numbers up here for a domestic store are the guidelines. I said 10% for domestics. It's actually 9% on this one. I think I've raised that to some extent because of what's happening today. F&I compensation, I typically look at 5% of super gross. Other compensation, meaning everybody else that's not in one of these categories that is directly assigned to the sales department, is going to be in other. Now, supervision does not include the general manager or any prorates of the general manager. It doesn't include the controller or any prorates of the controller or anybody else in supervision that is not directly in the sales department. So the way this is set up today, I look at, and I'm less concerned about each one of these categories as I am this total down here, because what I want to see is not in excess of 35, 36%, somewhere in that range in a domestic store. So that's the way that sets up.
Hey, Gary, what I love about it is it gives you a predictable outcome. I find so often out there in the field where we have, dealers and GMs and controllers that are kind of shaking their heads because they can't believe either how much they're paying somebody, or on the flip side, you have, managers that are saying, man, I feel like I got shorted because I don't believe people go through what we're showing on the screen here and getting a predictable outcome in terms of the performance that they're looking for. So I love going step by step. And I think this is almost a paint by numbers in terms of how to get to a compensation plan where everybody can live with it, because everybody knows in advance exactly what should happen at the end.
Exactly. Okay, now before I move on, I got a couple of important points I want to make. First, a majority of us, and Sandy, you're obviously one, in the dealership consulting community, together with many client dealers to whom we provide services, have long recognized a need for changes in sales department compensation plans. The traditional plans which we have employed over the last several decades no longer effectively match the operating strategies that are being implemented in many dealerships today. particularly in those stores that are committed to market-based pricing. And this dealership that I'm showing you, called Central City Chevrolet Buick, I think it is. And I've changed the name to protect the innocent here. They don't believe in Mickey Mouse advertised pricing on new vehicles. They believe that you don't throw a number up there that makes the assumption that everybody is a veteran, everybody's a first-time buyer, and everybody is whatever. They advertise it as if this is the deal, okay? And they try and come as close to the market as they can. And they set their used vehicle prices according to what vAuto reports, and they try to blend their price somewhere between 97 and 105%, depending on the age of the vehicle. So they're about doing what everybody else is doing.
So Gary, I've had a guest on before. I'll say his name, James Baining. It's already public knowledge. And when you bring up used cars and pricing to the market, he was one that fought non-negotiating and aligns with what you're saying now. In other words, he is now at a system where he's pricing his vehicles, and this is what you're going to buy it for. But he fought that very hard on the used car front for obvious reasons. He's afraid he's going to have people shop and leave. And what he found was his volume actually increased. His salespeople had more conviction in what they were selling and at the price they were selling it at. And also what he found was in making it very easy and fast for the consumer to get to the bottom line that they wanted to get to, the ones that did shop, he was shocked that he did not lose near the percentage that he thought he would. In fact, he won more of those than he thought he was losing, simply because as some of these people went on to try and get better pricing on similar vehicles, it wasn't as easy and as fast for them, and they became frustrated and ended up rewarding him with the business.
Absolutely. And I think you're going to see now. I don't want you to get me wrong. I'm not an advocate of one price. Okay?
No, I'm not. I'm just bringing that up because I thought that was interesting.
It is, but I happen to be an advocate of a perceived one price. So there's a big difference, and I think the thing that we're seeing today is if we're doing it right, we're going to be perceived one price. But I don't want to pass any deals if I can help it. So. As you'll see as we go through this, how we try and interrelate this pricing thing to have it make more sense. Okay, so one other important point. When we develop our compensation targets, we got to make sure that we include all sources of compensation. It is customary for some manufacturers to directly incentivize salespeople and sales managers. This is also true with certain dealership vendors. You don't want plans that work against the manufacturer and or against your store or group objectives, but you also don't want to overpay your salespeople and sales managers. So we got to make sure that we take into consideration any additional sources of income before we start setting up a plan. Okay, first element, determine if a salary element is necessary. If in fact it will help us attract and retain quality sales personnel. Will a guaranteed draw against incentives serve as well as a salary? It does not seem to. So that's my answer to that.
Gary, what percentage of stores do you think are out there that do some type of salary?
For salespeople,
yep.
I think it's becoming more and more prevalent. You can't hire. I don't think you can hire Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z salespeople unless they're on some kind of a security blanket. Okay.
And what about you, Sandy? What are you seeing on that front? Oh, he might be frozen. Oh, Sandy, can you hear me?
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree.
You're breaking up, Sandy.
See folks that I see stability, and it does give us an opportunity to attract higher levels of talent when there is a salary component to the compensation plan.
Okay. Go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
So how much does it have to be? It varies on the market. I think it has to be comparable to what these people can make in other areas of business other than retail. I mean, we're still viewed in the car business as a second-class occupation, and we can't seem to get past that, which is sad. But nonetheless, if we do the right kind of job, interviewing, attracting people, attracting or selling the profession, as long as we put enough money up there to start with and show them what they can make, realistically, I think we can be more successful in hiring people. So how much? I don't know. In this particular case, we decided on $500 a week, which gave for the primary staff. Now, the senior staff would have been insulted if we'd given them a salary of any type, okay? So the 10 guys who were on the primary staff were going to get $500 a week salary. So, obviously the traditional pay plans were all straight commission or draw against commission. And these younger people want, and their families, their wives, the spouses, they want to see some kind of standard security. So that's why we have to plug in some salary. The other thing, I think if we can, I try and avoid gross profit or percent of gross with salespeople of this type, because I think that the salespeople that are the customer that's dealing with a normal salesperson, they resent working with somebody that they know is on commission. So I prefer to make sure that they are aware that they could be on some kind of a bonus program, but I don't like the word commission. I think the consumer resents having to deal with commission salespeople. Okay, so the first thing we look at is how to, and this is an important area, after the salary, and it sort of goes backwards, but I have to do this in order to determine how much we're going to pay out in variable. How much are we going to pay out in miscellaneous spiffs and incentives? Because this is where most dealers get killed and a lot of pay plans get messed up. And these things include fast start, fast finish, other monthly contests, payouts on the sales activity leaderboard, spiffs on aged vehicles, other flats, and special bonuses. Why is it important? Well, it's important because in most dealerships that I have gone into that had compensation plan issues, this was one of the big issues. The miscellaneous incentives budget was almost never planned properly, and it was never controlled or managed. So the overall compensation plan went out of sight and got crazy. So my recommendation typically is that we make the decision how much we're going to reserve of the compensation budget. So if, for instance, the compensation budget for salespeople is 17%, then we might want to say 2% of that is going to be reserved for miscellaneous spiffs and incentives. So when we start the month, if our realistic target super gross is $500,000, then 2% of that's going to be 10,000, and that's the number that we're going to budget for miscellaneous spiffs and incentives. And once it's gone, it's gone. We're not going to spend more than the 10. So that's the way I would do it. Now, I'm not going to say 2% is the right number, because I've had dealers that want to spend 5. I've had dealers that don't want to spend any. Okay. 10 grand doesn't go a lot doesn't go very far when you're paying out $500 spiffs on an overage used car, right? So that's why it's important. So how much? Well, in this particular store, they were doing a lot of good things, and they didn't have to really incentivize overage used cars. They'd run contests every other month, and that was about it. And so they really didn't feel that they needed to budget a lot of money, but they budgeted $30 per retail unit for miscellaneous spiffs and incentives for this group. And they budgeted $40 per used car for the senior staff, or for $40 per unit for the senior staff. And the guys on the senior staff are the ones who are making all the money on these things, always. Okay. So you'll see that this doesn't look like a lot of money for this group, but keep in mind this group is on a salary. And this is listed as compensation element 6, and I didn't lose my mind. I didn't miss elements 2, 3, 5. I just wanted to show this first because this has to be taken into consideration first, along with the salary, before we decide how much can go into the other variable elements. Okay. Then we need to determine the remainder of the pay plan and how we're going to allocate it. So do we want to pay on results? If so, volume and gross, or CSI scores, or whatever. Or we want to pay on activities, desired behavior, such as value selling, price to sale gap, customer reviews, other activities. If the primary controllable performance goal is volume, then the largest incentive element for top producers should also be based on volume. Volume levels and per unit bonus amounts can easily be modified. So you'll notice this primary plan does not have any incentive here on gross per se in this level. So we're paying a salary. We're not paying any incentives until someone hits 6.5 units. Once they hit 6.5 units, incentives start to kick in. And they go up by every half year, actually every unit, but they start at the half unit. So the interesting thing is, if you look at this level here at line incentive at unit 9.5 or 10, that's either one of those, the retroactive incentive amount would have been $650, 10 units at $65 a piece. When he gets that next unit, or the full unit, when he goes to number 11, he gets $85 retroactive. So that unit, number 11, not only earns him $85, it earns him $20 on the prior 10 units. So you think he's got a nice incentive to get that 11th unit close to the end of the month? Yeah, $285. That's big bucks. So that's the way this is set up. What we're trying to do is get everybody thinking about, get me one more, get me one more, get me one more unit. This next level is on price to sale gap. This is element number 3. This part of the compensation plan is focused on the activities of value selling and defending our pricing. And like element 2, it's tied to volume on a per unit basis. Assuming that management's made the decision to price competitively and hold the line on minimal discounts, this element continually encourages the salesperson to get all the money that we're asking for on the internet. Average monthly discount ranges and per unit bonus amounts can easily be modified. Should it fit your operating culture, an additional subsection of this element, incentivizing trade under allowances, must also be included. Now, I've also sent Sandy and Scott one of my typical price to sale gap scorecards. So it can be sent on to you if you're not sure how to do this. But what we're trying to do is look at the average transactional discount between what our final transaction price was and what the initial price was as advertised on the internet. Okay. And we typically, in a domestic store, for instance, are trying to get to somewhere around the $300 mark. So this gives the salespeople an opportunity to pick up significantly more money by eliminating or reducing the amount of discounting they're doing from our already discounted price that is on the internet.
Gary, let me ask you a question. With COVID, obviously a lot of stores, whether they laid off or furloughed salespeople, various, even management and stuff like that, and went very skeleton crew, and a lot of them are ramping some of that back up now. Are you seeing any shift? And maybe this is more of who am I going to hire back, and maybe it's more of a restructure my sales team question than a comp plan question. But is there any changes that are happening to comp planning based on some of the changes that you're seeing from just the sales model changing?
Yes. And although it's not what I'm going to tell you is a change in a significant number of dealers, but what we're seeing with some dealers is they are doing a lot more with less. They are getting a lot more productivity out of fewer people, and that means that their productivity standards, because they found out they could do it during COVID. Now they're emerging and they're saying, why can't I continue to do it? So it's a matter of saying, okay, now how do I adjust my compensation plans to ensure that people are going to be paid what's fair and I'm not going to get hurt?
Well,
so,
and where that's in, go ahead, Sandy.
I think there are that are in my experience field, and that is number one, the vehicles evolving right now. And so time to deliver vehicles to a customer has been drastically reduced. Two reasons. People.
Hey, Sandy, I've got to mute you, buddy. You're breaking up really bad. So let me ask you, type it in the chat, Sandy, and I'll read it out. Let me ask you this, Gary. So one of the things that one of a very frequent guest in the DWIN community is Adam Aarons.
He's a typical example. He's doing a lot of things right.
Yeah. Oh, incredible operator.
Yep.
And one of the things that he kept bringing on early when we started this was, listen, I no longer I'm looking at my sales team as an overall, what the expense. And just to give you an analogy, as the dealerships evolved, right, we had our sales team and sales management. And then we had, internet leads are coming in. I'm going to create this BDC. So now all of a sudden, here's a store selling 200 cars a month. Salespeople, sales management, we've always had. We had BDC, and a lot of these stores still, the needle didn't move. They're still selling 200, but they think they're just handling the leads better. But all we did was add another layer of cost to our number. So what Adam does is he just takes up anybody involved in sales, whether it's the BDC, whether it's our traditional salespeople and management, and he wants to know what the units are per total, employee count. And as we get into comp plans and you start bringing on, if more stores are going to start bringing on salaries, then obviously doing more with less becomes that much more important. How are you seeing all this impact all this?
I don't see a lot of dealers that are, I'm seeing a lot of dealers that understand that they can do more with less, but I don't think that's the majority. I think the majority of dealers are going to go back to the old way.
It's already happening.
Yeah. And when you've got somebody like Adam who has a standard of 20 units per sales department employee, he knows how to do it. He knows how to do it right. I don't know where you can do that in a big store, but I know you can do it in stores like what he has.
Well, he's got some stores selling some serious volume. So, he's got, everybody that's got multiple stores have got some better than the others, but he's got a few stores with pretty high volume.
Okay. All right. I guess all I'm saying is he's got the right idea. He's got the right mix. And what he's also found that he's doing is he has got people who are multitasking and able to do responsibilities. So he's got people that can manage, they can do F&I, they can do BDC, and they can sell cars. And when you have that, all of a sudden your ability to do more with less improves significantly. And that's what he's doing. So,
and I just want to give you a heads up. We've got about a few more minutes left
Yep.
before I want to get Will in here to talk about some of the updates.
no problem. I'm going to cut this. I'm going to cut this pretty short. I'm going to go to the fact that this element is on customer sourcing, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the salespeople to do less, to not do less, to do a better job of bringing in their own business rather than depending on the BDC and the internet and the inbound telephone to bring leads in. So we're incentivizing them on self-generated deliveries. So elements 3 and 4 these are the areas of activities or behavior that we're incentivizing. Item 5, typically an incentive on CSI. The only importance here is how you incentivize for CSI may depend on how much your manufacturer, how much money your manufacturer is throwing at CSI as far as the dealership is concerned. Where it becomes a major financial issue for the dealership, then we want to pay more to the salespeople for getting us the kind of CSI behavior we want to see.
Yep.
Okay. Then once we're all done with getting this laid out, what I do is go back to the original targets and I say, okay, where did I end up compared to where I wanted to? So the original targets are on the top. The final numbers are on the bottom. So you'll see the total income is very close. The per retail unit number is very close, and the percent of all in or super gross is very close. So that came out just the way I wanted to see it. Now, I am going to quickly go through the senior manager pay plan so that you understand what we are trying to do there. And again, let's make sure you understand these guys are getting paid on F&I, and they're getting paid on their front gross, what we're calling as sales gross. They don't get paid on doc fees. They don't get paid on manufacturer's incentive. So the average sales gross in this particular store when we did this was $24.25 across the board for everybody, okay? The average all-in sales gross was, or the super gross was $3,000 a copy, new and used. And this happened to be exactly where the dealer principal wanted to see it. His belief was if we were significantly below $3,000, we were doing a bad job pricing and doing a bad job in gross control. And if we were significantly above $3,000 in a domestic store, we were passing deals. So he was happy with this. And he was prepared to pay these guys, these senior guys, a 26-unit guy, he was prepared to pay him 25% of the amount of money he was bringing in. So he was going to pay this guy $19,500 on his 26 units a month. Okay, $19,500 a month. That's a bunch of money. But he's doing F&I. He's working off his own portfolio, and he's taking care of his customers. Yep. So that's the way that was the target. And then we were paying them a percent of gross according to this chart. We were paying them also a bonus on self-generated deliveries. We did not need to pay them on GAAP. They knew how to get gross and hold gross. We were paying them on CSI. And we were paying them on miscellaneous spiffs and incentives, but $40 a copy. So their actual number against their target came in at these numbers. So the annualized compensation for this guy at 26 units was $234,000. The 14-unit guy was going to make $95,000, and the others were in between. So
let me ask you this, Gary. What part of the country is this store in?
Northeast.
What kind of market?
Northeast metro.
All right. So high cost of living market as well.
Not necessarily. No, I'd say it was modest.
Okay.
Okay.
Modest for up there.
Modest for Northeast.
Okay. All right.
Modest for
It's
Northeast.
not Louisville.
That's what I was saying. That's gonna. I'm gonna sell J&L and then just move up there and sell cars.
Well, if you do, if you do F&I and do that. Okay. Here's my last coming up on my last slide. Okay.
Yeah.
Final pay plan testing. This is what we have to do next. Okay. We have to perform this in order to determine our overall resultant compensation payout percentage based on our current or our targeted mix of salesperson performance levels. So this is what it worked out in this particular dealership. Senior staff, scenario 1, we had one guy, Greg, doing the 26 units. We had 2 guys doing 22 units a month. We had 2 guys doing 18 and 1 guy doing 14. This is what they were making, what they were performing, and what their payouts were percentage-wise. In the primary staff, we had 2 guys at 12, 3 at 10.5, 3 at 8.5, and 2 at 6. So 16 salespeople, their average performance was 13.3 units per salesperson, 213 total retail units, of which 120 were being done by the senior staff, and they were doing the F&I on those. So the total group compensation was 119,716, and the comp percentage for all-in gross was 18.73. Now, I was okay with that. I only want to pay 17%, but that's on super gross, and that's not including F&I. Now, I got 6 people I'm paying on F&I. So that additional 2.73% or 1.73%, I'm looking at and saying, that's pretty cheap for that additional F&I gross that I'm paying these guys on.
Yeah.
So this works, okay?
And so, Sandy, let me bring you in on this because you're our culture and leadership expert. You know, when you have people making money, obviously you're going to do a better job retaining them. But we've all sold at some point, right? We're continuing to sell today.
Sure.
And the reality is when you're starting to roll like that and you feel good about what you're making and stuff like it, I mean, you sell more. I mean, it's not just about retaining people, but it's about creating the right culture too, right?
There's no question about it. And there's no substitute for effective leadership and management as well. You know, big momentum loves to get fed, but we also have folks that sometimes get fat, happy, and lazy. And so when you've got the right kind of culture in the organization, which is leadership, accountability, and recognition playing a very important role on an everyday basis, not just when we feel like it, not just when we get inspired from time to time, but every single day, that's when you start to see this momentum where everybody is excited about coming into work every single day. Everybody is making a generous income, and the dealership is realizing a very strong net bottom line. And it's driven by culture and having the right compensation plan in place. I love what Gary does because most of us are not disciplined enough to put together a formula that makes sense and then take the time to prove it out. The last slide perhaps is the most important, where Gary says, let's go ahead and test out and see, does everything that we think we put into this compensation plan work? And that's the only way to find out is when you put the proof positive and test it at the very end. But I love exactly how he goes through this process, because this is some of the best time that you can invest. The dividend that you continue to pay out over time when you do something like this is for years and years.
Well, you know what I love about it is all the people that are either watching, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, that maybe not even familiar with the car business. And hopefully there's some future salespeople that might see these numbers out there and understand, because to me, and the car business the auto business has always been just this hidden gem for people that want to make a lot of money and they have a lot of drive and self-discipline. So with
it's
that,
better than being a barista at Starbucks, my friend.
Yes, it is. And so, well, depending on how much coffee you like. But let's
we got free coffee at the dealership, bro. I'm not worried about that.
Gary, thank you very much. I want to introduce Will Fernandez here because Will,
Thank you, Gary.
yeah,
You're welcome.
there's some recent updates you wanted to cover.
Yes, thanks a lot, Scott. And I just got to say, the power of DWIN. I've had the pleasure of working with Gary recently over the last couple of weeks, and his insight is incredible. And I'm really blessed to have him, get some of his experience going my way. So it's really a pleasure to listen to Gary.
Well, that's because you both love numbers.
Yeah. We get excited over numbers, which is not well. Listen, when you see those kind of numbers, I get excited about them too. So, so listen, I just wanted to update everybody really quick. There was another interim final rule. I'm not sure when these interim final rules actually become final rules. There was issued last week for the PPP loans, which is a little bit of a game changer because the SBA and the Treasury keep on changing the rules, or at least explaining what they meant 5 months ago. And the big change is if you're going through your PPP loan forgiveness, one of the non-payroll expenses that are eligible for forgiveness is rent. Well, they've defined related party rent, meaning that let's say you have a dealership and then you have another realty company that you own the dirt and you're sending the rent over and you're the owner of both. Well, for PPP loan forgiveness, you'll be limited on the amount of rent you can take by the amount of mortgage interest that your related real estate entity is actually incurring during the covered period, during that 24-week covered period. This was never in any of the regs or anything before. It came out last week. And if you have a property that's free and clear of a mortgage, none of your rent is going to be allowed to be forgiven during the PPP process. So go ahead.
Will, what if a lot of the, people were able to get some of their mortgage payments deferred?
Well, if you're not paying the interest expense, you're not going to be able to take the deduction. Because one of the other things I know I shared with you guys last night, I sent you guys over an email with the actual ruling, and in the ruling it says you have to show us the payment of the mortgage interest and the cancel check or the wire and some kind of evidence that that's what it's for. So if you had deferment during the covered period, then that interest is not going to be forgivable.
Well, I believe most people that were deferred still were paying the interest part of it.
Okay, if that's the case, then you're fine. It's the mortgage interest component. But the logic doesn't make sense because the SBA's logic is if a rental company, if a dealership, for example, I'm going to use a dealership, had the building and land within its operating entity, then it would have a mortgage interest, and they wanted to put those people on an even playing field with those that were paying rent to a related entity, and that's how the mortgage component came into play. But what they totally ignored is that if I'm a dealership and I'm paying rent to a third party on a property that doesn't have a mortgage, I still get to deduct I still have my rental expense as a forgivable expense. So that's another reason why we've been getting calls on people that want to apply for forgiveness right now and not wait for the end of their 24-week period. We're still advising, sit still until we know what all the rules are. And supposedly Congress one day will act and may change some of the tax treatments as well. So that's a quick update.
All right, I appreciate that. Sandy, did you want to? And sometimes Sandy, I got to mute you depending on your connection here. So, but fire away. We'll let you close this out.
Well, I first of all I want to thank.
All right, Sandy, I'm muting you. We're muting Sandy, so I'm going to take the lead on that and thank Mr. Gary House. Outstanding job. Hopefully, a lot of people. I'm confident that a lot of the dealers and general managers, the people who are making the decisions on these comp plans, got a lot out of that, and hopefully spark some ideas. Because in the end, if we can find ways to where we can compensate in a way that's motivating, where it attracts better talent, where it helps us retain more talent, improves the culture of the store, and makes us more profitable, right? It's always trying to find that balance. And a lot of times what you see is people overreach here and then overcorrect here. And yours gave a very systematic way of trying to kind of prevent that, I think.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. You're going to send that PowerPoint and those other 2 files out to people, I assume, correct?
Yeah. So a week later, we always do recap notes, and we'll include all those things that you included in the recap notes as well.
Perfect.
So as long as people are subscribing to dealershipwin.com, we get that out to everybody.
My contact information is on the first slide of that PowerPoint. If anybody needs anything, got a question or anything, pick up the phone. First telephone call is always free.
And Will, do you offer free calls as well?
Yeah, but I'm not as free as Gary is on the first call. My first call is about 5 minutes. Just kidding. Now, if anybody has a question, feel free to reach out. I'll be glad to help them get through it.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. We'll end with I always like when Sandy's on here, and it's a shame he had that connection issue because he talks up and hypes up the fourth box. And so we've got a great fourth box guest coming in next week, Arnold Gassita with Petro Lubricants Oil Company. So we're excited with that. He's a big cigar guy, big bourbon guy. So we'll be talking with him. And hopefully he's a future person that we can bring on DWIN to help everybody become a little bit more profitable on the backside in fixed ops as well. So we'll end with that promo thing. And until then, we'll see you. Remember, DWIN is now going live, and it's always the first and third Thursday of every month. And we go live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and then YouTube. So until then, we'll see you guys.
Hey, listen, the fourth box isn't for everybody. It's only for those people who want to have fun, have a bourbon, smoke a cigar, and come up with absolutely ingenious business and brainstorming ideas.
I could do this all night long, guys.
I love to be a disruptor.
The first guy that gets that done is the winner.
You can't get any better than this. But don't worry, whatever happens in the fourth box stays in the box, baby.
This is some good shit. These notes are big.
All right. See you guys. See you, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Take care.
Yeah.